Hello, so my second book, Peripheral Linguistic Brutality, is out. You can get it now. It's actually at a reasonable price for an academic book. I'm really proud of it. Preparing this has been a huge part of my life for like 5 years. I can't wait to have it in people's hands. I really hope you enjoy it. And I really hope it's a really important piece of scholarship that people talk about for years to come. But I've already talked about this book before, and while I do want to announce that it's out and you can now actually officially get it, one of the things I really want to do with this channel is highlight other people's good scholarship as well. So in addition to this book, I want to talk about some other books related to Japanese that I've read recently or have come out recently that I think are pretty good and would recommend. Starting with a few that are written in English and then going to some in Japanese. First is Recreating Japanese Men. This is a collected volume with a bunch of chapters that are studies on Japanese men. I'm really glad to see a book like this because if you're not familiar, one thing that's kind of been a problem in study of a lot of cultures is that there hasn't been a lot of targeted focus on masculinities and male identities. But look, let's pause a second here. Obviously, men get studied a lot, but they don't get studied as men. They get studied as like famous individuals, or they just get treated as a stand-in for the entire population, which of course has caused lots of problems in medicine, etc. And in Japanese studies, for instance, historically you have like samurai, and in the contemporary world you have salarymen, and they've been placed as kind of the representative of all men, and that's not the entirety of Japan. So I was glad to see a book on just a variety of different male identities throughout Japanese history and male experiences, and this was very, very interesting as well. I got this book because there was a chapter on otaku that I was interested in, as well as a chapter on kind of Bushido myth and samurai identities, but the chapters were so good I just kept reading it, and pretty much every chapter that I went through was really, really enjoyable. Particularly interesting for me was chapters about the importance of guns in early Japanese conceptions of masculinity, once guns were, of course, introduced to the country. Discussions of kind of rituals of becoming a man in early villages, or indeed even a chapter on how in the early 1900s, Japanese medical bodies dealt with issues of hermaphroditism or gender identity when trying to do surveys. And the one that I thought was actually most impressive and really respectful was one that was based on interviews and data looking at the lives of Japanese homeless men and how they got into that situation and what their just kind of lifestyle was like. So if you're interested, this book is a great edited collection. It's always good to see an edited collection where pretty much every chapter is interesting, and it has a diversity in terms of not only what kinds of men are talked about, but the parts of Japanese history that these studies draw from, so I'd highly recommend it. Also highly recommended is Ametora. I really, really enjoyed this. This is a history of Japanese people borrowing from kind of American fashion and how a lot of the production of what we consider to be kind of a classic American style is now done in Japan and appreciated in Japan far more than in the West. This is pretty straightforward. It's just one person. It's a really good story. There's a lot of really, really good details in it. There are some things that I'm kind of curious why they're not in here. For instance, the history of Uniqlo for me seems to be kind of a chapter that should be here, and it's only mentioned briefly. But all in all, it's a really, really in-depth detail into a lot of history into the development of various fashion trends in Japan, noting how some of these fashion trends became linked to courses around like Japanese delinquency, etc. We talk about kaiwai a lot on this channel. Well, this book will tell you about earlier use of the term zoku to refer to like perceived as delinquent groups. And actually deals with a concept that I deal with in Peripheral Linguistic Brutality, which is the idea that Japanese people and anyone who kind of takes something from another culture is just kind of imitating it is something that is quickly proven wrong as these cultures become very, very distinct and very important in their local context as they inevitably clash with things that already existed there and that they now have to interact with that they didn't have to interact with, back where they came from. All in all, it's a really, really easy read. It's a light read, but it's a very, very well told and very well researched read, and I definitely recommend it if you're interested in the topic whatsoever. Books in Japanese then, I have 3. This is Nihongo Teki Rap no Sekai, and this is a fairly interesting book about the history of rap from a perspective of language study. This is the second book that I have read from this author, the linguist Kawahara Shigeto, and it's good. It's fairly easy to read. If you have N2 in a dictionary, I'm sure you can make it through this. And if you're interested in hip-hop, it's a good introduction into Japanese hip-hop and some of the things that they do with language. Like there's a lot about how rhyme is in Japanese hip-hop is not just, the end, but there's a lot of like inner rhymes and a lot of very clever things that are highlighted here. And it has a pretty good history of hip-hop in Japan, some of the major players. And the end of the book has a bunch of interviews with some of these players that are very interesting as well. I will say that this book is a bit more a history of the author than I'd like. I was hoping for a bit more of the analysis parts, and a lot of it is just kind of a background. Like you'll learn that he likes to go to maid cafes, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not, what I was looking to have analyzed in this book. But that's fine. This is clearly meant for like a kind of casual audience. And while I guess I, as somebody with a background in linguistics, wanted more of the linguistics part here, if you don't have that background and you'd like to get some of that, this is a pretty good introduction to some of the ideas, and it is a passionate defense of the artistry that goes into the Japanese rap scene. I overall did enjoy reading this book, and I'm definitely interested in the topic and hope that there's something he does, or maybe he has done, I'll have to look it up, that is a bit more in depth. Additionally, I've been doing a bunch of research recently on vulgarity in Japanese, and of course, to understand vulgarity, we have to understand politeness. So I've been reading an entire book about the history of sasete itadaku as a form. If you're not aware, sasete itadaku in Japanese has seen more and more use, somewhat controversially in some sectors. There's some debate because people are using it for things that they haven't actually gotten permission for, which is, I guess, literally incorrect. But again, rules don't exist in language. It's all just unconscious agreement. And if we all start doing something and more people are doing it than people complaining about it, it's now okay. So this book traces like the history of this form in Japanese, including the history of like ageru, kureru. Very interestingly, I learned that at one point there was only ageru in Japanese and it had like a number of meanings. There's a lot in this book also about how forms that are polite at one point become less polite over time, and so new things get invented to be more polite, which is a phenomenon that's been seen all around the world, but in Japanese there's a lot of complexity to it that helps us unpack it. And all of the chapters in here from a number of areas, including a very interesting chapter on how this form is used in manzai, look at it from perspectives of age, time period, geography, etc. So it's incredibly thorough. That said, this is, and no, I shouldn't have been surprised about this, but it's something you have to recognize, a 300+ page book that is entirely about the sasete itadaku form. So if you think you might get a little bit bored of reading about a single grammar form after 300 or so pages, I'd say you're probably right. And I will say that this is a thick read. This definitely requires not only kind of N1, but familiarity with academic Japanese writing. It's not written to be super accessible, but it's not like super obscure or theoretical either. So while it is a really, really excellent book, packed full of information with a lot of studies that are really, really fantastically done, everyone who's involved in this book deserves like a round of applause for the quality of their research. It does get a bit tiring at points, but like it is what it says on the cover, so you can't really blame anyone. And if this is what you want, this is definitely what you're going to get. A bit more enjoyable for me personally, though, was this book In Politenesu, so in politeness, right, both at the same time, which is a book on politeness and impoliteness in Japanese. And this is an edited volume with a number of chapters, and like the men book I talked about earlier, all the chapters here are really great. It's a fun chapter on analyzing one interaction between two mamatomo friends who ended up having kind of a falling out because of how their children interacted and their use of polite forms to kind of like actually distance each other throughout. It's really, really in-depth. It is just one conversation, but it's a fascinating read. There's a really great chapter analyzing dokuzetsu, or like caustic talk, used on Japanese variety shows to kind of insult people in a way that is still seen as friendly, trying to unpack why it's not seen as insulting, even though it is on paper. There's chapters on English, which surprised me. And there's a really interesting chapter on Natsume Soseki's kind of unfinished last book, looking at how the various characters in this novel use politeness and impoliteness to kind of negotiate this desire to constantly one-up each other. And it really shows how skilled Soseki was as an author of using polite forms and impolite forms to imply things and kind of have battles between these characters, which is great. I'd say that this book is also quite academically thick in terms of how it's written. Definitely you need kind of N1 and familiarity with Japanese academic language, or you want to get that familiarity if you're going to read this. But compared to Sasete Itadaku, it does have a wider variety of topics, which makes it a bit more fun to read. Together, both these books are definitely really excellent works of scholarship. Like, the studies throughout are really, really good. Don't feel bad if these books are rather slow reads for you. Well then, there you go. I hope this gives you some things to read, and I definitely hope you check out my book with Jess Crook. Writing an academic book is a huge amount of work, and trust me, we don't make much money off these. It's just for the love of the game. I guess I get my paycheck, I get paid to work on this during work hours, but trust me, this is not going to help with my mortgage. These are passions of love, and nothing would make me more delighted to know that there are people out there reading it that very, very much enjoyed it. Thank you for your interest in what I do. Thank you for your interest in research on Japanese at all. And I'll see you in the next video. Links to everything I talked about in the description on YouTube, or if you're on TikTok, just, Google it. You can do that. A little bit of research at home.